Ever wondered how you're able to lift heavier weights with less effort or run faster than you used to? Stay tuned to find out. In my last video, I spoke about what happens to the body during exercise. Now, these processes take up a large amount of energy and resources which can't be sustained. Or can they? When I sprint up a hill, I will eventually fatigue and have to stop. But if I trained, over time, would I be able to run up that hill without stopping? As I mentioned before, physical exertion requires energy. This energy cannot be created, it has to be converted at the level of the tissues requiring that energy. But when you're fit, your ability to supply the tissues with the building blocks required to convert that energy is highly inefficient. There's only so fast your heart can beat, or how much oxygen you can get into your body, or how quickly you can break down that glucose molecule to supply energy before your body goes, nope, no more, can't do this. The body has mechanisms that make these processes more efficient, so that for a given workload, less energy is required. But this takes time, dedication, and effort to achieve. Once again, let's start with the cardiovascular system. During exercise, the increase in blood volume that enters the heart chambers causes the ventricular walls to stretch. Now, during exercise, the stretch contributes to the heart's contractility by its elastic recoil properties. This is known as the Frank-Starling law. Now, without reinforcement, the heart would continue to stretch like a balloon until eventually it deformed and would no longer be an efficient pump. Instead, the heart undergoes hypertrophy. A good analogy for the benefits of hypertrophy is the elastic band model. Here I have 5 elastic bands. So I can actually pull this apart and deform it quite considerably with not a lot of effort. Now, if I add another 5 elastic bands, so I'm doubling the amount of reinforcement it's got. So I can only stretch it about half the distance I was able to do so before, and it requires actually more effort to get there. So it's less likely to deform, and it also has a lot greater recoil as well. Now, the muscle cells in the heart, which are called myocytes, are not able to undergo hyperplasia, which is where they increase in number. Instead, they have to increase in size, and this is what is hypertrophy. While the entire heart will undergo some degree of hypertrophy, it is the left ventricle which is most affected, to such an extent that the axis of the heart on an ECG will appear to change. So the increase in muscle mass of the heart walls allows for a greater force to be exerted with each beat, increasing the amount of blood leaving the chambers, resulting in an increased stroke volume both at exercise and in rest. This increased form of contractility is more energy efficient, and as such results in a lower heart rate at rest, as well as during exercise for a given workload. As the heart rate can still reach its maximum rate, the ability for more blood to be pumped per beat results in an increased cardiac output at maximal effort. The adaptations in the heart are primarily anatomical, as are those in the respiratory system. As with the heart, the stretch law applies to both the muscles of inspiration and expiration. The strength and endurance of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles increases, reducing the susceptibility to fatigue. The increased endurance and strength capacity results in an ability to sustain increased tidal volume and respiratory rate, thereby increasing the amount of air available to be exchanged in the lungs in a given minute. This results in an increased pulmonary ventilation rate. As well as increasing the strength and endurance of the muscles involved in breathing, there is also an increase in alveoli. There is also an increase in vascularization to those alveoli. This increase in pulmonary blood flow and increase in surface area of the alveoli results in increased pulmonary diffusion at maximal rates of work. This allows for a greater quantity of gas exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide for a given workload, meaning that respiratory rate and tidal volume can reduce for a given workload, saving you energy. Next, onto the musculoskeletal system, otherwise known as muscle and bones. Like with the heart, the trained muscles undergo hypertrophy. This is more visually seen in athletes where strength is the primary attribute, and seen less in endurance athletes. In endurance athletes, the muscle fibers used are primarily oxygen dependent. This means that the fibers need to stay thin in order for easy access for oxygen from the capillaries. There is a theory that the muscle fibers can change to the type the training requires. Fast twitch for strength activities and slow twitch for endurance-based. However, the evidence is varied and the percentage actually changed is small, and it seems to be mostly genetics dependent. What makes the biggest difference in muscle strength is the coordination of the muscle fiber recruitment. This is a physiological adaptation where the motor neurons that innervate the muscle fiber bundles learn to fire simultaneously. You may have seen effects of the latter as shakes following a workout. In order to sustain muscle group contractions, there is a ripple effect across the muscle fibre bundles, as each muscle fibre can only sustain a contraction for a short time. During the first 6 weeks of any strength-based program, the gains seen are primarily from neuromuscular adaptation. That's why little physical changes are seen, but also why the rate of change tends to plateau unless there is a program overload. During this period of training, the muscles increase the number of capillaries weaving throughout the bundles, increasing its capacity for blood flow, as well as increasing the number of mitochondria within the muscle cells. This allows for an enhanced oxidative capacity so that the muscles have the energy they need to work harder and longer. Now, not only do the muscles change, so do the ligaments and tendons surrounding them. This makes them incredibly strong, and it is often the bone that will give way before the ligaments and the tendons. Despite all these muscular changes, the bone undergoes minimal changes in bone mineral and mass content. The bony insertion site of the tendons will undergo some increase in size if the training involved is muscular strength work. Heavy bones would require more energy to move, therefore it doesn't make sense for excessive changes to occur. However, continued exercise-related stress on the bones can prevent and delay the onset of osteoporosis. Without those stresses, the bone will become less strong and more liable to fracture. Due to increased capillarization in the skeletal muscles, the blood flow actually has a greater area to cover. This means that the trained ventricles of the heart are exerting a greater force against a lower resistance. This results in lower blood pressure at rest or for a given workload. This lowering of the blood pressure is seen to a greater effect in those with hypertension. And finally, for the metabolic adaptations. These are the physiological adaptations to improve energy provision for the active muscles. Now, I've already mentioned the increase in number of mitochondria, but they can also increase in size. It is at the mitochondria where oxygen is converted with glucose. The more of this that is accessible to the muscles, the longer they can repeatedly contract before the buildup of non-oxidative products causes fatigue. As well as this, the muscles develop an increased capacity to store glucose and oxygen. This is via glycogen storage and myoglobin content. This means that energy is readily available before the during exercise mechanisms kick in. The muscles also develop an increased tolerance to lactate, which is a waste product of the non-oxidative processes of energy conversion. So, not only do the short-term energy demands improve, so do the long-term. The body will develop an improved ability to rely on fat for energy. The development of this method is fairly obscure, but it has been seen during trials. Actually, anytime you run, walk, climb, crawl, jump, do any form of exercise, any time you put the body under physical stress, it will want to adapt to maintain homeostasis and maintain energy efficiency. This is why it is the avoidance of sedentary behaviour rather than the fitness levels you reach that keep you cardiovascularly fit enough to reduce the risk of heart disease. But there is a finite point to these adaptations. The heart won't keep increasing in size, there won't be an abundance of capillaries growing, and you won't get cells filled with mitochondria. There is a fine balance between the cost and benefit of these adaptations. The body will only continue to adapt as long as it is energy efficient. The only way to exceed this limit is by external influence. Using external substances throw the homeostasis out of whack, and the side effect of these can be extremely detrimental to your health. This fine balance in homeostasis is why I'll never be able to sprint full speed to the top of that hill. The workload required far exceeds the anatomical and physiological adaptations my body is able to achieve. But that doesn't mean I can't try. To sum up, sustained physical activity can result in the following in the long term: heart hypertrophy, decreased resting heart rate, increased stroke volume and contractility, decreased blood pressure, increased gas exchange at the lungs, increased oxygen and glucose utilization at the muscles, increased tolerance to exercise for a given workload. So that covers today's topic, the adaptations the body undergoes after long-term exercise. Next time I'll be discussing what happens to the body when we stop exercising and live a sedentary lifestyle. So remember to like, subscribe and ding that bell if you want to be the first to know about that topic dropping on this channel in a couple of weeks. I hope you enjoyed this one, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for more FitMed.